me find you, they got no plans, I ain't going nowhere. Take your fast car and keep on driving. So I remember when we were driving in your car. Speed so fast, I felt like I was drunk. City lights stay out before us. Your arm felt nice wrapped around my shoulder. And I had a feeling that I belonged. I had a feeling I could be someone, be someone, be someone. You got a fast car. Is it fast enough so you can fly away? You gotta make a decision. Leave tonight or live and die this way.
All right. Well, we are going to get started. It is. Oh gosh, I lost my screen, y'all. Where the heck? Oh, there it is. Okay, we're back. Good to have you. Welcome to Building Bridges for America Virtual Book Club. Our last week discussing Stacey Abrams. Our time is now. We're so glad that you have chose to be with us on this Sunday evening. Just an quick introduction into who Building Bridges is. We are a grassroots organization that is created to mobilize and empower networks of relational grassroots organizers who are equipped to support campaigns and causes based in progressive values. And values are very important to us. And I believe Stacey actually talks about the importance of values and talking about your values as candidates. And so you can see our values there. And the values listed at the bottom of your screen, those come from Pete Buttigieg's 2020 presidential campaign. And we are an organization that was inspired by Secretary Pete's campaign, but we are an organization that is open to any and all progressives. And we exist because ultimately we want to see a just and equitable democracy safeguarded by an informed electorate, I can never pronounce that right, informed and engaged electorate that is where everyone is valued and belongs. So we are so thankful that you are here, and we hope you find that you belong in this virtual book club community. And to kind of explain a little more about Bridges, we have our four lenses: belonging, democratic reform, racial equity, and rural urban communities. And so as we read through this book and as we go about any of our other programs, we hope, well, we challenge ourselves and challenge you to look at content and issues through these four lenses. And we'll discuss that later this evening, actually. So again, welcome to Building Bridges, our virtual book club. If you haven't had a chance, let us know where you're joining us from tonight in the chat. And then you can also rename yourself to include your preferred pronouns if you so choose. Just to help guide us tonight, we ask that you adhere to these norms. Everyone's mic should be muted, but if for some reason yours isn't, we just ask that you keep it muted. We would also like you to contribute to the discussion, and you can do that through the raise hand button here on Zoom, or you can also share your comments and thoughts in the chat. Please just do so responsibly so that we can hear from a multitude of voices tonight. And this is being recorded, so if you would like to, you can turn your camera off or choose to rename yourself. And then lastly, let's respect one another. Let's create a culture of belonging in our virtual Zoom space tonight. And let's have some joy as we finish Abrams' magnificent work. And we're just so excited that she shared her thoughts and wisdom, and we're just excited to talk about it tonight. If you don't know how to raise your hand, If you are on a computer or tablet, at the bottom of your screen, you should see the toolbar in that reaction button. Click on that and you can then raise your hand. If you are joining us on your phone, there is the three dots, the more button. Click on that, and then you should see the raise hand feature as well. So I believe that is all you need to see visually. So let me stop sharing. Now I get to see all of you, which is exciting. And as I am taking care of something, I would love to introduce the book club team. First off, I forgot to say who the heck I was. My name's Wes, and I'm joining from Omaha, Nebraska. And you might notice I'm a little red today, plus I wore a red shirt, bad combo, because it was 88 degrees yesterday and I got a little sunburn. So glad for you to join us. I've been hosting book club since April of last year, and I have an amazing team. And so, Jamel, will you introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Jamel, and I'm coming from Vienna, Virginia. Um, really enjoy book club, and I was not outside getting a sunburn yesterday, even though the weather was very nice. I had my second COVID shot on Saturday, and I was very achy. Not just uh, for my wife, she didn't have any real reaction. I was kind of like I could barely move yesterday, so no sunburn for me. But clearly, I'm better now.
Good, and thank you for doing your part by getting vaccinated, Jamel. All right, Jana, and then we'll hear from Jenny.
Hi, I'm Jana, and I am in warm Lincoln, Nebraska. We had our third day of 80 degrees or more in a row. So we got lucky this weekend. I don't think we've ever had an Easter holiday weekend that's been this warm. It's usually really cold or snow even on Easter. But I was outside a lot, but I put sunscreen on. So I'm not as red as Raspberry Wes is. So happy to see everybody here. We'll have a good night tonight. Who's next? Jenny?
Yeah. Yep. Hey, team. Jenny Okamoto from Carmel, Indiana, kind of the central part of the state. And we've had some gorgeous weather. We've had some crazy weather. It's where it'll change 30 degrees within about an hour or two, which is just very typical for Indiana. And I'm really excited to be here and wrap up this book. Such a great read. Picked up so much. Love the stories. Been hearing from everyone that's participating. So thanks again for being here, and look forward to spending some time with you.
Awesome. Thank you, team, for helping make this 5-week journey a success. It's enjoyable to work with all of you, and it's so good to see all of your faces. I switched my view to gallery view tonight so I could see as many Jeopardy screens or I don't know what that little show, or not Jeopardy, but the Brady Bunch, the little Brady Bunch windows. I get to see as many of your faces as possible. And I believe Gianna is going to post into the chat our discussion guide for tonight. So if you would like to follow along visually, you can do that. And we're going to get started. Heads up, I got to grab my book. That's why I'm off. We're really discussing chapters 8 through the afterword this evening of Abram's work. And my opening question to everyone is, why are you here tonight? What brought you here? It's a Monday evening. You could have done many other things, but why did you choose to come to this virtual book club tonight? So if you would like to share, raise your hand and we'll hear from a couple of you. Otherwise, type your response in the chat.
Oh, I see somebody raising a hand.
All right, Karen.
Hey, everybody. I am here tonight because I live in Georgia. And Stacey Abrams is my jam. So, uh, being so close to all the action and but not so close as well. You know, just because we live here and I actually live outside the Atlanta area doesn't mean we get to interface with Stacey Abrams um, like people think that we would. I have recently been following and joined Fair Fight organization and trying to be a little bit closer, but to be able to read the book, I felt like would give me a better idea of what she really thinks about. It's one thing to hear her speak, but when you write something, and I also listen to it on Audible, so it's like story time with Stacy. So it makes me feel like she's talking to me. And then I've participated in clubs before. I love to read, so to be able to have a group of people and we're all reading the same book and get to talk about it and hear so many perspectives is wonderful for me.
Thank you, Karen. We're so glad you're here, and awesome to hear that you are become engaging with the work that Fair Fight Action is doing there in Georgia and also around the nation. Because when there's attacks on voting rights in Georgia, that's an attack on all of our rights as American citizens. So
Yeah.
appreciate what you're doing, Karen. And there's some good thoughts being shared in the chat, so appreciate that. Is there anyone else who wants to come um, onto a share with us verbally and say why you're here? Okay. Well, one thing I saw in the chat that I'm just going to shout out is, as Karen was talking about how, getting to hear, like, it was like story time with Stacy. And one thing I really loved about this book is how Abrams used storytelling to drive home the urgency to ensure that everyone has access to power through the vote. And I just really enjoyed hearing the various stories in each chapter. So shout out, I totally agree whoever shared that in the chat, because storytelling is powerful and it's something that Building Bridges really believes in as grassroots organizers. So we have a smaller group tonight, which is totally great because I feel like we can really dive into the book and hear from a multitude of voices tonight. And so Jamel is creating 2 breakout rooms. And while he wraps that up, I'm just going to share my screen one more time. We're going to go into 2 breakout rooms this evening. So it'll be about 12 and 12 in each room so that we're in a smaller environment and can really discuss with one another. And so I'm going to share my screen, and the breakout rooms are pretty much the same, as our whole group norms. Because we're in a smaller group, feel free, to keep that mic on. Just be mindful that, background noises could be heard and it could be hard to hear what other folks are saying. So decide, if it's appropriate to have your mic on or off. And then again, let's just make sure we can hear from a multitude of voices tonight in verbally and within the chat. And breakout rooms, one of the rooms will not be recorded. The other room will be, just for promotional purposes, because we like to put our discussion on YouTube for people to watch and listen to. And then again, let's just be respectful. Let's create that culture of belonging in this online space. And let's have joy as we finish our conversation on Our Time Is Now. So one quick reminder, especially to the co-host, is that we need a member of each breakout room to come back and share highlights with the whole group as we wrap up our conversation tonight. So Um, I think that is all I needed to share on that end. And Jamel, are we ready to go?
Yeah, I'm ready to push the button to open all rooms. Just make sure.
So, ch- chapter 8, was titled The Playbook, if I believe. And Abrams talks a lot about the not relying on that tendency for campaigns to focus on voters who, frequently get out and vote, or the swing voters. Because we hear a lot about swing states and swing voters on the media and whatnot. And Stacy talks about her experiences campaigning in the more rural parts of Georgia. And so, do you live in a more rural, suburban, or urban community? And if you were to help a candidate gain votes where you live, what ideas or strategies do you have that you think would work in your community in connecting with candidates with voters? And again, you can use the chat or unmute yourself and start sharing.
Yeah, Jan mentioned that her population is less than 10,000 people. So would we call that rural? Rural Ohio too.
I call it close to dying, is what it feels like. Like our state legislatures just, I mean, if we're not already dead, they're just putting one foot in the grave for us. It's awful.
We did a ton of work for Joe in Ohio, and there was a lot of hope for Ohio. And people started to refer to the fact that they were from the blues parts of the state, because there's really, like, I'm not from Ohio, I'm from, like, Cincinnati or something like that. But yeah, it's interesting for Ohio, like some of the challenges
Well,
that they would have.
I live in Iowa.
Oh,
And
Iowa, not Ohio. Okay, sorry.
Yeah. Iowa, Ohio, and Idaho are all the same to some people.
Oh no, not to me. I'm in Indiana, so.
Anyway, we have 99 counties in Iowa, and only 6 of them went for Biden. So
Okay.
it's difficult here.
Jan, do you have any ideas or strategies that you think would work for a candidate who was campaigning in your county?
My son ran for state senate, and he got 39% of the vote, which is remarkably huge compared to anything else. There's only 17% of the registered voters in our county are Democrats. So he obviously picked up a lot of voters. His strategy was he did a weekly radio show on our local radio station and spent 20 weeks building rapport and letting the community know. He did the research to make the shows knowledgeable, and people would stop me in the grocery store and say, "Hey, I'm no Democrat, but I'm voting for your son because he's earned my vote. I like what he says. He's a smart kid." But 39% of one county is not enough to win. So
But as Stacy says,
Mhm.
winning an election isn't everything.
Mhm.
So going to spaces where people can hear your message. That's what I heard when you were speaking. Thanks for sharing, Jan. Anyone else have any strategies of, like Jan shared, a family member who ran for office and had some successes? Anyone else have like some good ways that you think you've seen a candidate work in your community or have an idea yourself?
I am in Seward, Nebraska, which is very red. But so I've noticed that one of the best things is that relational organizing and the storytelling, to just start by talking to the people because especially in small towns, you end up knowing a lot of people in your town. But Seward is also a college town, and I think it would be really good to have representatives actually come out and speak at those schools, because in my time at Concordia Seward, I only ever remember there being Republican candidates coming out to speak, because most of the students were identified as Republican, and so they weren't really hearing the other perspectives.
I think that's an overlooked aspect, is people think, well, it's a waste of my time. And like Stacy was saying in the book, people were like, why did you go there, to Marjorie Taylor Greene's district and talk to people? Because nobody's going to talk to them. And how are we going to start pushing that curve a little bit and communicating some of what our real values are versus what they're kind of hearing, through these negative channels. So yeah, talking to everybody, going everywhere. Yeah.
Could I share another anecdote from the campaign trail?
Yeah.
So our son wanted to set up these drive-in events all around his district at 30 some, and some of them were just in tiny little towns, 200 people or so. And I was the person that had to set them up. And I came back and told him, I said, I don't know. Nobody's going to come to these. I mean, the town's so small and they're all Republicans. There's Trump flags everywhere. And he says, Mom, I have to give those events in those small towns, because if I represent them, I have to know what they are. So he's at this literally tiny town, and these two gals zoom up in their car and put it in park, and they jump out. And they said, "Are you the candidate?" And he says, "Well, yes." And they said, "Nobody has ever come to our town, ever. So we had to show up and see you."
That's awesome.
Showing up, I mean, that's the number one thing. And I think that Stacy talked a lot about, long-term investment as well. And I'm excited by the Democratic Party chair, Jamie Harrison, who's reigniting the 50 state strategy. So hopefully, every community, rural, urban, suburban, will see candidates investing in their community, see the party investing in communities, because I think that's crucial. Jenny, you want to go with number 2?
I got number 2. So the number 2 question talks, and I'll give you a little background on this, is Stacy talks about, atypically campaigns go for their super voters, the people with a high scoring, whether, that they're going to show up to vote, that kind of thing. And she kind of broadened out her reach and talked to unlikely voters. These are people that are sporadic voters, inconsistent. They're not the type of people that are going to get a mailer or door knock or that kind of thing. And she reached out to everyone. Do you know anyone like that, say in 2020, where you're like, they're not an engaged voter. They're not the type of people where people are going to talk to them, but they voted, and what drove them to actually vote? What do you think pushed them to vote this year? What was the magic, whether it was the candidates that were running or strategies? Anything that would be really cool to hear back if you guys heard anybody like that. Hey, Karen. Oh. You know any unlikely voters?
I have to laugh because I was going to say 2 of my kids.
Yeah. That was a big one when we called people for the runoff campaign for, I was helping with the Ossoff campaign, but of course we were calling for Warnock and Ossoff. And it was a lot of young people who nobody had called before and really pushed. And I just loved when I would call a parent and they were like, "Oh, we're voting." And my kid's voting and they're voting. They've never voted before. They have no choice. I love that because it was a combination of the 2 factors of like the relational aspect, that pressure to vote and accountability, and also that, that unlikely voter they were tapping into kind of thing. I think we all felt that pressure. So, yeah. Jan was saying that the unlikely voters that showed up in November were Trump lovers. Yeah. So those also, I think it worked on both sides where people felt that, impetus to vote both the GOP side and the Democrat side. Because we had a record turnout in the general election. We know that on both parties. Just Biden won by more votes, that kind of thing. Yeah. And I know personally working early voting, I saw a lot of GOP voters at early voting too. So that's where we really, you were turning them out, but we got to make sure we're turning out the right people too. But yeah, anyone else have an experience, say with a family member that was more of like an unlikely voter, or someone that just doesn't consistently vote, but really made a point of voting in this last election? Yeah. Guilt and shame works really, really well with them. Yeah. I think also too, when you reach out to younger voters, you're saying that their voice matters too. And I think, an unlikely voter tends to have the attitude is my vote's not going to really make a difference. We get a lot of that in Indiana because we are a strong red state. Nobody talks to us here, especially for a presidential election. And they just said, why should I bother? We're not going to win. But it's about laying that groundwork and starting that dialogue and building that network. Yeah. Yeah. Wes was saying one of his parties. Yeah, yeah, yeah. He had a 40-year-old coworker that just wasn't even registered to vote, had never voted before. Yeah, yeah. It's true. Yeah, hi, Karen.
I also had one of my friends who has voted in the past, and I think it was his family doing the guilt and shame
Yeah.
on him as well. But in the presidential election, he originally was not going to vote because he honestly did not understand the electoral college process. And he says it's not going to count. It's not going to count. And he was just convinced. And my husband and I kind of broke it down for him, and he took that to heart and he went ahead and voted. And he was happy afterwards, but
Yeah.
he didn't understand it. So
Well, and it's impressive that you found that out because I think a lot of people are embarrassed to say they don't really understand it. They've been, especially older people. So they are embarrassed to be like, well, I don't know why this makes it, why it's important or what the difference is. So, yeah. And I do feel like the Electoral College does discourage your general voting population because, much like in Indiana, it's not going to go to blue. So, why should I bother? You get a lot of that. But I feel like the more we reach out to people, and I usually really stress bottom up instead of top down when we get people like that, like vote local. That's what's really going to make a difference. It's going to impact your taxes and things like that. So yeah. The next question number 3 that we had was in the 2020, did you volunteer with a campaign that intentionally focused on low propensity voters? Which I really feel like the Georgia runoffs did focus on low propensity voters. Did anyone have any experience in another state on a campaign that focused on low propensity voters? My experience was primarily with the primary in Iowa, and I felt like they really just went towards those voting Democrats. But anyone have any experience with a low propensity voter? More of the unreliable? I thought I just popped that in there, Wes, since it kind of tied to that last one. All right, I'll put number 4 in for you, Wes.
Yeah. And I did a lot of phone banking in the primary, and I remember they would hey, by the way, this is like our level 4 list, which essentially meant people who don't usually answer, aren't going to volunteer, not even sure if they voted, and it was a struggle phone banking on those lists. And I wish I never really door knocked with anyone who wasn't. So yeah, so I
Yeah,
hope
we did a
I hope
list
that
in Georgia
changes.
that was landlines, not cell phones, which was a huge difference because so much of the campaigning had been done via text. And so those were the people already reached. We would hit phone lists where we're like, okay, these are people that haven't been talked to already, which was good and bad. It was a lot more work, but yeah, so that was exciting to do.
Ooh, and postcards to voters, and I know
They're still doing
When
that.
We All Vote, Michelle Obama, former First Lady, they do a specific outreach to low chance voters. So I guess I did do that for the general election.
I think with this election, they left no one behind. That was the strategy, and I think that's how we won. We blanketed everybody repeatedly, whether through Fair Fight and When We All Vote and all these, all the different campaigns. Yeah, no one was left behind this time.
So chapter 8, it's page 190 in the book, and so it was called the playbook. And just kind of a general question, if you have the book and got a chance to read it, Abrams shared her plays to be successful. Any ideas that stuck out to you that you thought were good and we needed to? I did put in the chat this idea of a listening tour where candidates or politicians go into their districts and they literally just drive around and just experience their district. So I kind of thought that was kind of cool.
She talked a lot about civics, like we just were talking about earlier. It's like people understanding before the election, like that long-term engagement, working through these steps of civics engagement. Educating people. She talked a lot about how she educated people on how the taxes worked. So then when it came down to it, they could be like, oh, that's going to impact me as an impetus to vote. And, she included everyone in this kind of long-term, consistent engagement, building the infrastructure. We all talk about it. And we've got I think coming off the 2020, we built such structure and trained so many awesome volunteers and got so many voters out that we just need to consistently keep that going into 2022. So yeah, hi Mike and Basil, sorry.
Hey, I liked in the book when I didn't finish reading, but I did read this chapter, and I liked how she was really focused on, she's basically debunking the whole, and also putting a racial context about the whole swing voter, like the white guy who could vote Republican or could vote Democratic, and actually doing the math, like, okay, there's maybe 115,000 of them out of X million, and yet there's probably 1 point something million of unlikely voters, and just laying out like why we engage. And also when she was talking, the point you were making earlier about the taxes and like going back and like going on the wealthy side of a district for the town hall and then going on the less wealthy side and having each side kind of having everyone come to either side, but choose how voters over time became very sophisticated in their questions because she's kind of educating them about how their money is being allocated. So I thought that was all really insightful. But the whole focus on the unlikely voters, it makes me feel good about the postcards I wrote. So
and this is Basil.
I'm Basil. So
well, and Jordan, go ahead. You can unmute yourselves.
Yeah.
We're small, okay?
It's very
Don't
polite.
feel like you have to raise your hand. Too polite.
We have a polite group.
But we didn't know.
It's all good.
Kind of building off of what you guys are saying and what we've been talking about with the unlikely voters and the swing voters, I really liked that part of Abrams' chapter when she kind of connected it to the West Wing and Veep, just to kind of bring us in a little bit to relate to that. But it made me think about Pete's values and the rules of the road with belonging and what we built this group on, and how if we're so focused on the swing voters, and how she even talks about how it gives more justification for skipping doors or skipping houses in the door knocking process if you're focused on just the swing voters. It sets us up to like be showing a strategy that doesn't reflect our values. So how are we going to convince voters that we value them and that their vote matters if we're focusing so much on that swing voter.
Good point. Yeah, well said. She even uses the word inclusion, one of Pete's, including everyone. You're automatically excluding everyone if you say, oh, you're not worth me trying to get your vote or talking to, kind of thing. So yeah, it's a really good way to put that. I like that.
Let's move to chapter 9.
Great. Wes, do you want me to post the next question?
Yes, if you could.
Okay.
I don't
So
have my.
Yeah, I got it covered. So this chapter talks about populism, more
yes.
international. Yep.
Populism and the death of democracy.
Yes.
And so as I was reading it, I was trying not to go back to our former president because I'm trying to move forward. But I saw a lot of correlations and to the work that him and the GOP is up to then and now. So I love history. So as you were reading and learning about the history of populist movements, was there anything that stuck out to you? And I'll share the one that stuck out with me because Stacy talked about this earlier in the book, but William Jennings Bryan, the only Nebraskan who's ever gotten so close to being in the White House, he was a populist and really was an advocate for the working class as a Democrat. And so I always enjoy when William Jennings Bryan gets a little shout out. So that was something that stuck out to me. But what about you all?
I don't know what page it's on, but there was something that she had mentioned about how currently the United States is number 25. I think it was 25 on the list of world powers anymore. And I don't know what the look back number was, but as she was given the history about different countries like Turkey and other countries where they were viewed in a higher way than they are now, and authoritarianism came and pretty much smashed everything, and the same thing has happened to us, that we have been we've lost our spot. We're not even in the top 10 across the globe as being that great superpower type of country anymore.
Yes, she really stresses how
25?
we can't go. What's 25th. We rank low on a lot of things, but she really does stress about we have to practice what we preach. We can't go out there preaching democracy when we're doing all those horrible things that happened during Trump. We always have to be accountable. And I think part of it is show there's growing pains with this whole process. But one thing I really appreciated with what happened in the past 4 years was we are better forewarned about the dangers of populism and a populist kind of candidate coming up. We're lucky we had a very disorganized, not very talented person that made a lot of mistakes. We're really fortunate in that regard that we didn't have somebody that was actually smart and savvy and kind of knew what they were doing. So I'm excited about the fact that we kind of have those signs. But yes, she really did stress that, we have to practice what we preach. It's important.
Does anybody know whether they've done another one of those international scales since Biden's been elected? I'd like to know where we are now.
I will look that up real quick.
I also, of course, really saw what happened with the media. Like basically, a populist leader comes in and breaks down the foundations and institutions. And we could absolutely see that's what he went after right at the beginning. And then at the end, went after our democratic process. What do you guys think would Stacy would help protect us from populism rising like it is? What do you think are some strategies that we could do to defeat that? Any suggestions?
We have to have an alternative message to Fox News.
Hmm.
Every place I go in town, Everybody that's got a TV on in their lobby, they're all playing Fox News. It's just a 24/7 constant drumbeat in my neighbors' heads. And we can't even get a word in edgewise because
Yeah.
they've already been poisoned against us.
And that's a tough one because it's a double-sided sword. We need to protect freedom of the speech, freedom of the media, but then we have people that are, these basically a propaganda channel that's kind of sending out that information. That balance between those two things will be really difficult to do. Wes, do you want me to go on to the next question?
Michael, do you have something you or Connie were going to share? I saw your window light up, so I wanted to check
I was
first.
just going to say one thing. I was struck by her. I'm not sure if I'm getting the phrase right, but I think she used the phrase authoritarian populism.
Mm.
And it made me think how populism is what you make it. It can be it can be a good thing in the hands of a proper populist, and it can be a bad thing in the hands of someone like Trump. Despite how clumsy he was, he really showed the vulnerabilities of our guardrails, And so I think you asked, what would be some suggestions to guard against that? And for me, it's an absolutely cantankerous press, one that is fiercely and ferociously independent and courageous. And I actually, overall, I thought that many outlets did a pretty good job of continually holding the administration's feet to the fire regarding its lies and its misconceptions and its truthiness.
Yeah. Yeah.
On that, like with the press and whatnot, Lester Holt, Jamie Harrison actually retweeted his little segment, and he essentially said, as media, we have a responsibility to not present issues as one side versus the other side, because if the other side is not factual, why are we giving it any space and any attention? And I think that I've heard that rumblings, by people on the Twitter sphere, if you will, by progressives, but that was the first time I ever saw a huge, Lester Holt is a well-known news person, and to hear him say we have to stop giving those who think the world is flat airspace, like, let's not present it as one versus the other. No, there are facts, and we will not allow you to spew non-facts. And so I thought that was really cool. So I posted a link. Hopefully that has the video, because it was really profound.
Yeah, I saw that was really, really good. And I put a note in the chat that in Pete's book, Trust, he distinctly talks about kind of the rise of this, false information, false news, when they felt like they had to give equal time to these arguments that were just not based on any fact. And it's, so how do we get away from that, the sensationalism in that kind of outrage news? But getting back to kind of populism and that kind of thing, how important it is to make sure that we build honest and factual communication to kind of defeat that. So Wes, you want me to go on with the next question?
Go for it.
Let's talk about if you know people in other countries. I'm going to post the question here. Do you know any people who live in other countries? Whether you do or don't, how does it matter to you personally if the United States' credibility as a democracy has declined, as described by Abrams?
For me, like we have friends all over the world, but like I think about like our Canadian friends, it's embarrassing, right? And they're like, what do you mean you don't have like the same ballot everywhere in the country? Like, why is voting not standardized? And this is kind of shocking to them. On the media question, I had something I was thinking about, which is, and I wanted to throw this out there, which is, what do we do about social media? And I've been thinking a lot about like the movie, if anybody saw The Social Dilemma, and the fact that it's, weaponized disinformation for profit, and how do we break that model? And do we break that model by just, changing the laws regarding the sale of personal data, and basically requiring social media, basically breaking their model, which, might put some useless companies out of business, but who cares? If democracy is at stake. But it's, maybe we just need strengthened privacy laws so that it's no longer profitable for Facebook to throw out lots of disinformation that will get your eyes on their websites, so that they can sell you to advertisers. Maybe requiring them to, maybe requiring you to have to consent to every single sale that they make. Something to break the model, something to fundamentally change the structure of that. That's just something I've been toying with, and so. But I just want to throw that out there, and I know that's different than broadcast media, the traditional media, which is also things like Fox News, which are also full of disinformation. But I've been thinking a lot about these structures and how do we break them, because I feel like if we don't break them, then they'll break our democracy.
Yeah. I think this administration has definitely got to be on the list. We've got to look into how we can handle this issue, and we can do something about it, because it's true. Though we've seen the rise of populism without social media, we can definitely, I think, all kind of see how to attribute it to what's going on. And it's just getting more and more sophisticated, how those messages can be, funneled to us, more specific kind of thing. Yeah. So talking about overseas, anyone else have any experience with people and are kind of hearing back about our reputation, America, the past few years, and how we think we can repair that reputation?
My husband has.
I'm sorry.
That's all right. You go ahead.
It's really frustrating when you get information about your country or about your state from people from outside. It's like, the information that's being taught in schools, even, it's amazing that sometimes I find out what's happening in Texas because someone in Canada or Japan, said, "Oh, did you see this?" or whatever. Just like, I didn't hear it, and I try to keep up, but I mean, it's really, really hard. And, it's good that the kids are on Zoom sometimes, because you can overhear what is being said, and you're like, really, so I think it starts with education too. And history is history. It is not alternative facts. It either it did or it did not happen. And so when you have people pushing back against just facts and history, it's very difficult.
Yeah, sometimes I find I feel like I miss a lot of important news that's out there because it's not exciting enough for the news, those handful of news networks to handle. And then you hear a story come out of Texas or California, and you're hearing it from BBC or something like that too. And you're like, but that's an important story. I'd rather hear about this than what I'm hearing about that from 5 channels, the same thing, kind of thing. So yeah, it is interesting. Um, yeah, how that affects. I mean, I think even like when I look at like England and what they're going through versus what we're going through, and those comparisons and that kind of thing, it's always interesting to see how they view COVID in England. And I'm trying to learn how other countries are trying to solve problems, and they're having problems too, just like we are. And I felt like if we all kind of shared the fact that we're all kind of in this together, that we're sharing these issues. But yeah, it is so selective what we hear news-wise. Jordan, do you want to tell us your story here? I see you got a post here in the chat.
Sure. I went to Berlin in the spring of 2018, and I just went on a trip alone. And I was young; I was only 20 at the time, and so I had not actually voted in the 2016 election because I just didn't know how to vote or anything about it and was not taught. And so, and at this time, I was starting to learn a little more just because I was so frustrated with what was going on. But then, but then when I was just like in this pub meeting some people, we were having a good time talking religion and politics, and we were sharing where we were all from. There was a couple from Australia, a couple from London, and some fellows from Germany, from Berlin where we were, and a guy from French, he was a French Canadian from around Montreal. And when they asked me who I was and where I was from, and I said that I was from America, then the conversation shifted to Trump and all the laughs came out. And it was just like, I didn't like being associated with that. And it was just kind of embarrassing and having to like talk about what's going on my end. And then, but that kind of just encouraged that fire in me to really know more about what was going on and be ready for the midterms when they came along and just be a little more committed and trying to talk to other people too.
We have family in Sweden that we stay in touch with, and they were describing their fear for us because of the trajectory they could see our country on and how much the rest of the world relied upon our stability, and that was fearful to them.
Yeah, because a lot of economies, the world economy is really counting on the US. And if we become more and more populist and close our, and have more issues with trade, which, that's what his intention was. He wanted to do those things, which weren't effective, but very, very harmful kind of thing. Yeah. Do you feel like since Biden got elected that people are more going to view 2016 that administration is just kind of okay, a flash in the pan. This is what I'm. Do you think just by having Biden in office that just like automatically restores a lot of credibility on the world stage, or do we still have work to do to earn that back?
I think it was really encouraging to see all the world leaders coming out right away after the election was called and getting behind the support for Biden and showing that they're willing to kind of have that open relationship with us again. But I think it will take some work to prove that too.
Yeah, I think he's definitely taking the right steps, getting back into the Paris Accord and all of that. Like, and plus being that he has such an established political career and influence in the United States, it kind of became inevitable that we needed someone like Biden to take office to kind of help us build back that, build back that credibility. But we can, we're imperfect, so.
I just, there is no this is okay. There's this kind of debate in foreign policy circles about like, or you hear a lot, I guess because we're here in around DC, you always hear about, oh, America, like is America this exceptional country? And I always find that really off-putting because it's just sort of like, no, we're not exceptional. We're a country like anybody else. And like the things that happen to other countries, good or bad, can happen to us here, and they do, and we don't recognize it. But in terms of like there isn't someone else to take up the mantle of promoting democracy overseas. Like, it's not like the Russians or the Chinese have that particular interest per se, that they, or other powers generally have kind of very narrow and selfish views about how they engage with the world. It's very much for what their advantage is. And whatever our flaws are, I don't think there isn't, I've come around to the idea that, like, yeah, we have lots of flaws and we've done lots of things wrong in the world in our history, but it's also um, like we're facing these kind of systemic challenges in the world in terms of things like climate change and stuff like that, and we're the only hope of the planet. So, I'm as flawed as that might be, but it's sort of like we cannot fail, because if we fail, like, pretty much the planet will fail. That's the hard reality of it. So
Failure is not an option.
Failure is not an option. We cannot fail in our task of rebuilding our democracy here in this country.
One thing that I've been kind of marinating around the past few months is that democracy is messy. And it should be, because it's a government ruled by people, and people are all going to have varying opinions. So, if you have a one ruler who says goes, is a lot easier than a whole bunch of people putting in their different opinions about things. And I think it's always going to be a challenge that we always have to pay attention to really protect our democracy, is something we're always going to have to work at, for sure, that we can't take it for granted. It's just really kind of processed for me recently about that the Congress is always going to be arguing, and you're always going to have people from one extreme to another, much like a very big functional family is made up of lots of different people. So we have about 10 minutes until.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, and I really don't know what to do with this, but it's like, it seems that, like, a huge chunk of the Republican Party, or the majority of it, not of individual persons, but has just become this profoundly anti-democratic force. It's like they've ditched the small c conservative, limited government, more freedom, whatever stuff, and they've just become this profoundly kind of a white grievance party. And the question, and like, in a way that right-wing parties in other countries, in Europe in particular, have also become very anti-small d democracy. And the question I have is, how do we address that challenge?
So are you kind of saying they're standing less for conservative values and more about being anti-democratic or anti-liberal kind of thing?
It's power at any cost. And this is what I watch what's going on in Georgia, and I would love it for the Georgia people in this chat room to jump in now. It's sort of like, no, we want to hold power, so we're going to keep as many people of color and young people from voting as we possibly can. And you see that being replicated elsewhere in, Texas, which is already like the hardest state anyway to vote in, I think. And my question is how do we, it's not an argument about taxes or regulation now. It's an argument about, like, are we moving to the system of completely rigged elections? Where it's already, the decks are stacked against us as
well, kind of like Stacy talks about in the beginning of the book. It's about power and maintaining that power and doing whatever the minority has to do to stay in power, because we know that group is the minority now. And so the only power they have is to change the rules so the majority can't vote them out,
Right. And then the other question I have is, does everybody keeps saying, after the election, the fever will break people will break from Trump. That didn't happen. Then after the insurrection, which I don't understand why there haven't been more prosecutions, and particularly of members of Congress who have overtly supported that. It's like there's a whole clause in the Constitution about engaging in sedition and not being allowed to sit in Congress if you've done that. But and I don't understand why that's not been applied. But will the fever? Trump is, I think, pretty certain is going to be in legal trouble, and he's there's a better than even chance he's going to wind up behind bars. It's like, at that point, does that break the spell?
Yeah.
That's my
I
question.
think I think it's almost like the message that Stacey was saying to beat Trump. We don't beat them at their own game. We beat them at the right game. It's like the right messaging, consistent. We're sticking with the values of making sure America is a democracy and that everybody can vote and has access to voting. That's a better way to argue it than it is to spend the time going, don't take away our rights to vote, that kind of thing. But I think our room's going to be closing soon. Who is nominating themselves to be kind of our speaker in the main room, to be able to kind of provide the summary of some of these great stories, especially about the populism that popped up and things like to kind of bring those back to the main room for us? Wes can pick somebody.
I don't like to volunteer, but
Volunteer. Oh,
hey,
Basil.
No, Basil,
or
no.
Karen.
Well, as you guys marinate on your passion for sharing with the whole group, in chapter 10, Stacey, we got 5 minutes here. Stacey lays out three challenges for us. Number one, in the next coming election, you don't even have to wait if there's no election in your community within the next 6 months. Just reach out to 5 strangers or 5 people who you never talked politics with and see if they're registered to vote. She also challenges us to write to our city councilmen, county commissioners, and state representatives to introduce yourself and express concerns about an issue that you really care about. So be thinking, what is it that you are really passionate about and want to share? Or you could just pick the issue of gerrymandering and redistricting, because all of our states are going to be doing that. It got delayed because census numbers are being delayed. So there's time to talk about that, which Abrams talks about in her book. And then number 3, Karen has already shared how Karen is investing in her community and state through joining the work of Fair Fight Action. So think about what organizations or campaigns exist in your community so you can volunteer with and get engaged. So anyone have an issue that's going on in your state that you think you could write to your political representatives about? Or is there an organization that you are currently working with or wanting to get involved with?
I'm with Building Bridges. I think they're awesome. Well, I'll tell you, for Indiana, what happened came out of 2020 was there are 3 new statewide organizations that are formed, like out of the blue, from former grassroots organizers. So there's a lot of new ones that have popped up. And then there's, of course, like League of Women Voters, fantastic. If you think that you cannot make a difference, you can't. Just look what happened in Arkansas with the trans vote, with the governor kind of coming in and vetoing that, which we did not expect. That was a lot of pushback. Yeah, so it can happen. You can affect change right now, especially as most state legislations are in office and they're voting on things that impact us. So yeah. Legal Women Voters is wonderful. Voter registration, that also is a great opening to getting, voter engagement, getting people registered. So who's going to be our spokesperson to the main room? We're not allowed to do it, so no. Jordan, would you like to? Yes? You got it?
Sure.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate that. Great.
Awesome. Well, we got 2 minutes. So
yes.
If there's an issue going on in your state that you are going to write about, let's share it in the chat or an organization. Unmute yourself, because to me, this is why we exist. We love talking and discussing, but we want to see we want to see us act and get engaged. So what are you passionate about? How do you want to get involved? Shannon, thanks for sharing in the chat.
I like how she mentions just simply reaching out to your congressperson, or maybe I'm thinking of something else somebody else said about that. Stuff is running in my head. I'm actually a member of National Action Network, Reverend Al Sharpton's program, and we are kicking it up several notches down here to participate in voter registration. But that is one of the things that everybody can do, regardless of what state you're in. Call your congressperson, call your senators, and call on behalf of Georgia. You can call your representatives on behalf of whatever else issue that might be important to you, or you can call our Congress people and senators as well. And one of the ways that's real easy to do that is to use the 5 Calls app. And it will give you scripting and talking points and information about the particular legislation that's important to you.
Cool. So that's just an app called the 5 Calls app?
Yep.
Cool.
All right, welcome back. I'm gonna get my other one out of here. Just was joining in case anyone joined our main room and needed to get back to your breakout room. I hope you all had an amazing breakout discussion. And so what we're going to do is we just got 2 questions as a whole group. And the first is to hear a 2-minute or less recap of your breakout room discussion. So Jamel and Jana, if your individual could unmute themselves, or if you could unmute them, and let's hear what happened in your room. Oh, do I have to unmute you all?
We ran out of time. They didn't nominate somebody right at the end that they were just about to. So I'm going to say that nobody said anything during our discussion and then challenge somebody to step up and correct me.
Is there anyone from Jamel and Jana's room that would like to oh, it looks like Jamel, you got nominated.
That's not fair.
How about, since you got nominated, we're gonna have the one who voluntold you chair. Vanessa. And we'll get you unmuted.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Thanks. Yeah, we jumped all over the place with these questions. I'm trying to find the week 5. On question 2, we talked a lot about the unlikely voters and people that hadn't voted, and quite a few of us knew a lot of the unlikely voters. And then there were unfortunately a lot of us that knew people that didn't vote, and it mainly came down to disinformation is what, and my vote didn't matter, and things like that. I didn't take notes of, if I know I'm gonna be doing this, I usually take notes, and I didn't, so I apologize. And then chapter 9, question 2, did we know anybody that lived in other countries? And a few of us had, and it bothered us a great deal about like whether our credibility had been damaged or not, and a little bit of excitement about us getting our credibility back. Let me see here. Question chapter 10. I'm sorry, I'm not prepared.
You're good. You're doing
like I said, we just kind of jumped all over the place. It was a really deep conversation, though. We we got into a lot about how to get people to vote, and it was really good. Like I said, we jumped all over the place with these questions.
You want to share one of your ideas on how to get others to vote? One of the ideas that stuck out?
I think Chris had some really good ideas, but again, we were like all over the place. So if Chris wants to give one of her examples, like that would be lovely.
Let me talk. Okay. I was in the middle of typing something out and then I was like, oh, other room. Okay, let's go back. I don't even know if my message sent, but I was going to tell you. So we started I appointed a voter engagement czar at our last election, right? It's taken off like I can't even tell you, right? I can't keep up. And that's part in my group, that's part of the story about like I invited people in that I needed to maybe wait and see what the big group wanted to do first. Okay. But anyway, okay, into the belly of the beast, the Republicans would like it seems like Ernest. I'm very suspicious. The Republican Party has a new chair in the county. They would like us to come talk to them about our voter engagement project. I don't know. I just found out about that today. So anyway, you just start. I don't know. I got so many ideas. I'm sorry.
What was one of them? Like, give us one, like, true
Well,
idea.
to get people to vote. To get people to vote. Oh, in rural, it's a completely different timeline than urban, right? Rural conversation, you hope for 6 people in an afternoon, like a long afternoon, to have meaningful conversations, right? And that is success. And redefining success, I think that might be the biggest thing. Like you must redefine success. When I ran for House district and I lost, I got 25% of the vote, which was 5% less than the guy that ran 2 years ago, and I still succeeded. Like, if you tell me I didn't succeed, I'd be like, really? Like, what's your scale? We need to talk, right? Safe spaces. I didn't even get.
And Stacy really talks about that is, we cannot define winning by winning the election. We have to think longer term, because I guarantee you, Stacey Abrams was working way before 2018, her gubernatorial race, and way before 2020. And if that work hadn't happened years before, we wouldn't have seen what we saw in November and in January. So thank you also for running, because that's just the other thing. As Democrats, especially if you live in rural areas, is taking that courage to just run and step out and get uncomfortable. Thank you, Vanessa, for not being totally ready to share out. You did an amazing job. Glad to hear it was a great discussion. And Jordan is going to be sharing from Breakout Room 2.
Hi there. So I'll try to keep it brief. When we were talking about the low propensity voters, Karen brought up a great point about how just educating people more about the Electoral College is really important, because it's so easy to think that your vote doesn't matter, so why vote? And then that kind of connects to what we were talking about later with when Abrams talks about the swing voters and how that's just not a great focus, is when people only focus on the swing voters, because we have the values of every vote matters, and we're trying to push for every vote matters. So our strategy should reflect that, and we shouldn't be skipping houses along the way as we're knocking on doors. We talked about, when also trying to get more of those people that don't usually turn out. We talked about trying to get to the people closest to us first that we know that don't vote. So putting pressure on our kids, putting pressure on our parents, and or our coworkers. Wes brought up a good story about like half jokingly asking a coworker if they were registered to vote, and they didn't know and didn't know how, or they thought maybe it was too difficult to. So I think just asking about that and helping someone register and just seeing how simple it is to get registered. That's the first step. Is if someone's registered, then they've already made such a big step to be ready to vote. So I think that would help a lot in getting more voter turnout. And then, Michael brought up a good point when it went into the discussion on populism, about how Abrams points out or she calls it authoritarian populists, and how there can be good populists that, like, if there's a populist candidate and they have good intentions, it can be okay. But so just to see the difference in the authoritarian side of that. And then we went into the discussion of credibility being really important and how we need to earn that back, and how it looks pretty promising after seeing the response in the world leaders after Biden was elected. But we do need to earn that back, and how it has an effect on us as citizens of America. And and a lot of us said we were embarrassed after the 2016, and how our friends across the world were responding to that, and how we need to work to get ourselves back on track. So if anyone else wants to add to what I said, trying to pull together everything.
I thought you did a great job, Jordan. Thank you so much. And, and one thing that I love what Jordan connected to, and this is kind of our last question, is, and this can be an overall reflection on Abrams' book, is, we have those four lenses: bridging rural and urban communities, joining the work towards racial equity, promoting democratic reform, and then creating a sense of belonging through politics. And Jordan, you specifically mentioned that, when we only focus on the swing voters, and kind of forget about our base or those who aren't likely to participate, we literally don't create belonging when we do that. And I loved how you connected that topic back to belonging. And so open it up to, the room here in just like 1 minute or less, because I want to honor the time we have remaining here. But did anyone, was there a lens that, just that really struck with you as we finished Abrams' book, or as we conclude our journey? What did you learn in regards to one of those four lenses? Go ahead and raise your hand or pop in the chat and we'll get you unmuted. All right, Michael and Connie, there you.
I'm not sure where this fits, but real quick, I will just say one of the main things I got from this book was how true she was to herself, how she showed fidelity to her own authenticity, and that's what I think led to her success. And I think that's a big lesson for the rest of us, to be true to your authenticity and to have fidelity to who you are.
Love it. Go ahead, Chris.
Well, Michael, we even talked about that in our group, about having those authentic conversations. And that, it's really the easiest conversation you can have. Like, there's no lying. There's like, why does this impact me? Let you speak from the heart. There's no faking it. Just do it, right? And it's not about what your hair looks like that day, or, what clothes you're wearing, or, and the same goes for running for office. It's like, it's not about you anymore. It's about the issues that brought you here. It's about your passion. It's about just doing it despite your own vanity.
Thank you, Chris. Let's hear from one more person. Jamel?
Oh, I don't want to be the last person, but I was just going to say one of the things that really struck me was, you know, just that whole character thing. Because Stacey Abrams chose to focus on democracy, you know, a challenge to democracy, to protect democracy, as opposed to a challenge to her own election. You know, we need to see more of that among all our politicians.
Absolutely, absolutely. And kind of like, you know, like what Chris said, is it was bigger than just one election. And through, I just love the stories because so much good in it. Just makes it real, and you really saw that authenticity come out, and that passion, and that urgency as well. That even though 2020 happened, and I think we can all say we were relieved, there's still work to do, because as Abrams writes in that populism chapter, it's not going away. The thoughts aren't going away. We're seeing it. It's continuing, and the GOP is still the Trump party, whether we want to believe it or not. That's how it is. So, and I hope really in chapter 10, where we are challenged by Stacey to reach out to 5 people, to get engaged in our local communities, to take action and volunteer, and then to introduce ourselves to those who serve us at the local level. I really, really hope, I'll be frank, it would be a disservice if all of us in this room tonight would not take one of those actions. Because if we just read the book and did no action, then we missed the message. And I think that's what's at stake in our local communities. Because as I said, and many have said, when they attack voting rights in Texas, in Georgia, or in Iowa, they are not only impacting those citizens, they're affecting every American citizen. They're threatening our basic democracy. And so I truly hope that we all take one of those 3 actions, if not all 3 of them, in the weeks to come. Because it's all good to talk and hear and learn from one another, but if we don't share that and act upon it, then we really do Abrams and our country a disservice. So I want to share my screen here as we wrap up, if you will. I'm gonna make it quick, but do have a few things that I really want to share with you all. No, that's not the button. I already shared my screen. All right, present. Here we go. Our next book, the Mobilize link is live for you to sign up. It's going to be a 5-week series, and we're going to be reading Kill Switch by Adam Gentleson. And it's pretty much a focus on the Senate and how the current Senate is crippling our democracy, with a particular focus on the filibuster. So we hope you sign up, get that book from your library or your local bookstore, and join us starting on April 26th. And I believe Vanessa is putting in links to sign up. I'll include that link in our follow-up email. There's tons of ways for you to get involved and take action here with Building Bridges. We got a new lineup of videos for the month of April, and our overall theme is hope. And I forget what the acronym is, but I know it's about getting people to engage, because that's what gives us hope, is when we take action in our communities and across the nation. We have 3 candidates who will be up for election in Wisconsin and Colorado. So we wish them good luck tomorrow. But you can still write postcards for Jalen, who's running for city council there in San Antonio. So that's a great thing to get involved with in our Day of Action events. And then coming up on Thursday, you know, Stacey used stories. She told her we saw her authentic self through her writing. You can do that too as you engage with your family members, your coworkers, a stranger, whatever. You need to unlock your political power. And if you're hesitant on what that looks like or how to do it, sign up for the training led by Jenny and Kaz. It's this coming Thursday at 8 p.m. It's really good. You don't want to miss that. And then we have a documentary series coming up. This will be our third one, and this one is called Kiss the Ground. And so if you are from a rural area, I highly suggest this one, because this is a way for you to learn about restorative farming practices that can bring rural Americans to the table to join us in the fight against the climate crisis. Heads up, we don't call it climate change. We call it the climate crisis, global warming. Climate change is a Republican word. Do not use it. Climate crisis, global warming. So Kiss the Ground, it's a great, great film that talks about how we can truly create belonging and get all voices at the table when it comes to climate justice and climate action. So that is what we have going on. Give us a follow. Let's continue the conversations and be engaged through social media. Let's use that social media to promote positive, progressive visions, values, and beliefs. So that does it. And I am going to change the settings. I'm just so thankful that you all joined us, whether it was tonight or through all 5 weeks. So let's unmute ourselves and say goodbye. And I hope you all have a great weekend. That we'll see you on the 26th.
Right.
Bye. Thank
Good
you.
night.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Wes and Jana, thank you.
Great job. Awesome book club this time.
Bye
Good job.
bye.
Wonderful.
Bye. Thank you all
Bye.
so much.
Cool.